Hi, welcome to FliteTest. I'm Josh, and I want to sincerely thank you for buying the FT Delta Swappable Speed Build Kit. Your purchase here enables us to continue to provide free content that's hopefully educational, entertaining, and Lord willing, inspiring as well. The kit comes with everything you need but your electronics. We will have links in the description, but before you go ahead and put the airframe together, you will need to build your power pod. The power pod is the heart of the Swappable series. Everything fastens to this, so if you haven't done so already, go ahead and get it built, get your electronics put in, and we'll get started. Our first step in the build is to cut the bevels for our hinge. To do this, we're going to crack this 180 degrees, take it to the edge of our table, and we can take an X-Acto knife and simply just going right above the paper and the center line, cut roughly a 45-degree angle with your knife. Make sure you have nice free motion, and we'll do the same process on the second side. Now, if you're in an environment where you don't want to use a razor blade, you can simply take a hard sanding block on a piece of wood and sand a 45-degree angle into your elevon. This is perfect for an environment where you don't want to have any razor blades. You should be able to assemble this whole entire airplane without having to use any X-Acto knives or any razor blades of any type. It is a little bit messier, but it's great for an educational atmosphere. Our next step is to position our two wing halves with the bottom facing up and simply connect it nice and parallel using this notch in the middle as a guide to keep everything centered. Take a piece of tape, lay it down roughly in the middle, and then carefully push together your two wing halves as tight as possible, and then fold your tape down. Once that's done, you can see we can lift this up, open up this gap, lay a bead of glue starting about a ½ inch from the back, stopping just before the notches in the servo holes, and then continuing on its way to the leading edge. Lay this flat on the building board. If there's any excess glue that squeezes out, simply squeegee it off. We can then take the remaining part of our tape, fold it over, and then put an additional piece of tape on the very top to give it more support. Yeah. You can then go back with a knife or a pair of scissors and simply cut your reliefs in for your servos and where your power pod's going to sit through. Now that our wing halves are joined, our next step is to align the perimeter of the outer KF step with glue. Make sure you have a hot glue gun that can supply enough glue quick enough and that doesn't cool down the glue stick too quickly. Also, it's a good idea to have an extra glue stick handy just in case you run out. I like to go around the perimeter and then just follow up right in the middle. And make sure your building board is nice and flat and put even pressure down on the whole KF step. Very important that it has nice even pressure along the whole thing so you don't get a warped delta wing. We're going to repeat the same process as before, but we're also going to apply an additional bead of glue along the center line of the delta. Fold it over, spread that glue out with nice even pressure, and allow it to dry. Now for just a little bit of extra strength if you wish, you can take some tape and go right over the original path that your tape previously had, but tape this top KF step down. You can even just move this down here like that. Our next step is to take the supplied control horns and just test fit them in the holes to open up the hole just enough, or the slots just enough to make sure that everything lines properly. Now these are lined up perfectly, so the hole will be in the proper position, which is right over top of the hinge line as you see here. We're simply going to open these up so we can put some hot glue in the cavity and push them down in. Next step is to trim our popsicle stick to go in between the two fin slots. So we're going to cut off one edge 90 degrees with our scissors. And then get the other one roughly the same dimension. It can be a little small, you just don't want it to be a little big. Apply thin glue. Put it in between the two holes that were cut for our zip tie. We'll slide our zip tie through the holes, and then we'll just bring it through the zip tie just enough to where it clicks a couple times, and then we'll leave it loose. We'll tighten this down later. Our next step is to take our power pod and install our delta onto the power pod. We're then going to take our barbecue skier, slide it through the back of the power pod, through the zip tie, and out the other end. We can now tighten this down, not too tight, just enough to make it snug. We don't want to bend this to the point where it starts opening up our holes in the power pod. Just enough so it keeps it down on those alignment pegs. Once we're happy with the fit, We can go roughly 1/4 inch on the outside walls of our barbecue skewer and cut it to size, and then reinstall it. There we go. Our next step is to install the barbecue skewers for the front of our wing dowels. We're going to puncture through the tape into our foam and go roughly 1 inch, 1.25 inches in. A nice twisting motion combined with the sharp barbecue skewer will cut right through this like a drill. Repeat the same process on the other side. Try to keep this as flat as possible. You don't want to come in an angle where it's going to be hard to get your power pot on. The next step is roughly cut about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. You can now remove the wing and apply a small dot of glue in each hole. You don't have to completely fill it up, and using a twisting motion we'll drive the barbecue skewer in, leaving it roughly a little over 1 centimeter or about 3/8 of an inch sticking out. Now while the hot glue is drying, it's a good idea to slide it right back in the power pod to make sure everything lines up. Next step is to install our servos. We're going to install our servos with the servo arm facing forward. And the hole is just a little bit smaller, so you just simply push down through the foam. We're going to lift up on both of our servos, put a little drop of glue underneath each one, and set them down in place. You can then go along, wipe off any excess if we need to. Our next step is to take the push rods that have been provided, go in the very bottom hole of your control horn, then slide it through your linkage stoppers of your servos that have already been centered up. Once we power on the radios on the final step, we'll go ahead and tighten these down. Our next step is to install the fins. For this, we're going to need our little gauge called the fin gauge. For this step, we're going to go ahead and apply a bead of glue on the very bottom. It's important to do one fin at a time, letting it thoroughly dry. If you rush this job, you can get fins that are uneven. You can pop it in nice and vertical. Simply use your fin gauge, and this will give us the proper amount of angle. And then hold at the angle until the glue is thoroughly dried. Now that our fins are glued in place, we're going to go back and reinforce it with a small bead of glue along the outsides of the fins, and if you wish, the inside. If you have more glue than you wish, you can just take a scrap piece of foam, just drive it right down into your seam. Now that the fins are installed, we're ready to connect our servos, center everything up, and lock down our linkages. We'll power up our receiver. Lock down our linkages. We'll make sure that our elevons are nice and level. Now this is set up for basically trainer. As you get more advanced and more comfortable with this, obviously you can increase the throws by increasing the distance on your servo arm on where your linkage is. But for right now, this is going to fly nice and docile, and that's great. We're now ready to put everything together. We're going to go ahead and simply reinstall our receiver, and we'll slip our rear dowel in, locking in the back of our fuselage. At this point, we're going to go ahead and, just like on our other swappables, we're going to go to the CG reference mark and make sure we have our battery in the proper location where it needs to be. That looks good right there. The FT Delta swappable is now complete and ready for test flight. I hope you guys enjoyed the build. I hope it was a good experience. And once again, I want to thank you for your support and keeping FliteTest going. But right now, I want to go fly this.